Okay, so this video is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to be speaking about a subject that I don't often touch on, but I actually do have a big interest in, and that is the paranormal. At least in this case, perceived paranormal, I should say, because we don't know the full circumstances behind it. Needless to say, there's an enormous amount that goes around the internet. Stories that are purported to be true, stories that are blatantly made up. There's all sorts of things you can find on cyberspace that purport to be some sort of supernatural event, whether it's connected to ghosts or UFOs or whatever. Um, there's no real reason why I haven't made other videos on this, although I am interested in the subject. Indeed, I might start to make more videos on the subject, um, because it is something that I've long had an interest in. And I take what I consider to be a healthy balance between skepticism and also acknowledgement that some things simply are very difficult to explain. A few things I want to say. I've got a little bit of a cold at the moment, so you'll excuse me for that. It's rather irritating. I was going to make a video on the New York primary, but to be honest, there's not really much more to say that hasn't already been um hasn't just bit my tongue there. That hasn't already been said. Um, Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton won comfortably, and I think at this stage it seems almost certain, unless the Republicans have a contested convention, that it will be Hillary versus Donald. Anyway, that's not for the subject matter of this video, because I don't want to annoy people who've clicked on this wanting to, read about the paranormal and I'm talking about politics. But I just thought I'd put that in passing. So, I'm going to read out a report that I've come across, and it's circulated around the internet for a while now. And I'm going to comment a bit about it afterwards. Now, this is a very, very strange account. Um, I should say that the Cedar Sinai that is mentioned here mentioned as Cedar Sinai Hospital. I assume that's Cedar Sinai in Los Angeles. As far as I know, there's no other Cedar Sinai Hospital in the United States, so I'm assuming this is the well-known institute in Los Angeles. So, I'm going to read this out. Bear with me because I've had to literally take a picture on my camera from the article. I can't use a video cam at the same time as reading articles directly from another website. So I've had to take a picture of it. Bear with me, it's not very long, but see what you make of this. So in June 1972, a woman appeared in Cedar Sinai Hospital in nothing but a white, blood covered gown. Now, this in itself should not be too surprising, as people often have accidents nearby and come to the nearest hospital for medical attention. Cedar Sinai is also a trauma centre, so we deal with that sort of A&E, as we would call it here in the UK, A&E emergencies. But there were two things that caused people who saw her to vomit and flee in terror. The first being that she wasn't exactly human. She resembled something close to a mannequin, but had the dexterity and fluidity of a normal human being. Her face was as flawless as a mannequin, devoid of eyebrows and smeared in makeup. She had a kitten clenched between her teeth. I'm going to come back to this point. Her jaws clamped so unnaturally tightly around it, to the point where no teeth could be seen. The blood was still squirting all over her gown and onto the floor. She then pulled it out of her mouth, tossed it aside, and collapsed. From the moment she stepped through the entrance to when she was calm, to when she was taken to excuse me, to when she was taken to hospital room and cleaned up before being propped for sedation, she was completely calm, expressionless and motionless. The doctors thought it best to restrain her until the authorities could arrive and she could not protest. They were unable to find any kind of response for her, and most staff and members were too uncomfortable to look directly at her for more than a few seconds. But the second the staff had to sedate her, she fought back with extreme force. Two members of staff had to hold her down as her body rose up on the bed with that same blank expression. She, excuse me, the writing's quite small, so I'm straining to look here. She turned her emotionless eyes towards the male doctor and did something unusual. She smiled. As she did, the female doctor screamed and let go out of shock. In the woman's mouth was not human teeth, but long, sharp spikes, too long for her mouth to close fully without causing any damage. The male doctor stared back at her for a moment before asking, "What the hell are you?" She cracked her neck down to her shoulders to observe him, still smiling. There was a long pause. She, the security had been alerted and could be heard coming down the hallway. As she heard them, she darted forward, sinking her teeth into the front of his throat, ripping out his jugular and letting him fall to the floor, gasping for air as he choked on his own blood. She stood up and leaned over him, her face coming dangerously close to his as she excuse me as she uh excuse me, the writing is very small here. Dangerously close to his as she faded from his eyes. She leaned closer and whispered in his ear, "I am God." The doctor's eyes filled with fear as he watched her calmly walk away to greet the security man. His last ever sight would be watching her feast on them one by one. The female doctor who survived the incident named her the Expressionist. There was never a sight of her again. Now, there is actually an accompanying photo with this, and there's numerous sites on the internet that more or less say the same story. The photo does indeed show what appears to be a humanoid woman being sort of propped onto a hospital bed. And right enough, the two nurses in the photo look like they're sort of looking away from her. Um, Based on the body motions in this photo, it looks like they're taking some force to put her down. Now, this figure is humanoid in appearance. To me, it looks slightly Asiatic, like she could be Chinese or Oriental at least, but not quite. I could definitely see where the mannequin description comes from. However, nurses in the 1970s didn't use these sort of um, props, these sort of mannequins. Mannequins were very basic. My mother's actually a nurse, and I asked her about this. I said, when you were training, because she actually trained back in the 70s, was this the sort of model that you would use? And she said they were just blank mannequins, like without any facial features. And I assume that would be pretty similar the world over. This looks like quite an elaborate mannequin, if that's what it is. It has eyes, but there's no eyelashes. And it has a sort of positive expression, but it's slightly creepy. It looks, it's a black and white photo, but it looks flawless. Insofar as the skin is completely white, if indeed that's what it is. Um, there's a few things don't add up to me. Firstly, this thing about the kitten. Now, unless I'm reading that wrong, my impression is the kitten was between the teeth. But the way that description reads sounds like it was entirely in the woman's mouth. Now, no full kitten, even a small kitten, could fit inside a human mouth. As for the fangs not being able to close properly, the photograph certainly doesn't indicate that there are any fangs. There are another few problems with this. There appears to only be one photo available. Now, maybe that's the only facilities, the only camera that whoever took this had, which then leads to another question: who took the photo? Was it one of the medical staff? There's nothing in the story that indicates who actually took the picture. Um, if that photo really is from 1972, then it goes without saying it can't be photoshopped from that time. However, there's a problem in this. The story has only emerged in the last few years. All the websites are only a few years old. I saw a discussion of this the other day on a forum, and someone said there's no other sources for this that predate 2012. So the story purportedly dates from 1972. How then did this suddenly emerge in 2012 unless someone has leaked the story, like someone who actually witnessed it? Cedar Sinai Hospital itself, needless to say, has no account of this actually happening. My impression is if this really was some sort of incident and there was someone turned up to the hospital in the state, um, it sounds to me like someone suffering serious mental health problems, like delusions, and so on. But that wouldn't explain the long fang spiked teeth that she purportedly has. Someone has said there was some sort of scientific experiments going on nearby, and one of the patients escaped. Actually, the way I would describe the photo is someone who looks like a burns victim. I've seen images from the First World War of soldiers who went through plastic surgery from being horribly mutilated on the trenches, and they have that sort of expressionless look post surgery. It looks almost like that. So to me, this woman looks like someone who's been a burns victim and she's had an operation. That's just my impression. It is quite a creepy photograph. There's no question about that. I have to say, I'm swaying more towards cynicism in this case, simply because it's too fantastical and there's too many things simply don't add up. Um, I mean, all the reports are pretty similar, so I'm not saying there's inconsistencies in the story, but there's things that aren't answered, i.e., who took the photograph? Was it one of the nurses? Was it some sort of official press person at the hospital? Another question is, why was it all hushed up? Now, surely if this person had devoured two men, that would have been a major news story. Surely there would have been some news footage at the time, even if they tried to cover this up. Surely in 40 years, one of those nurses would have broken their silence. So there are certain things that just don't add up with this. I could put a link, but to be honest, it's now a widely circulated story. Just type in the expressionless to Google, and it will automatically come up. Type it into Google Images, and you'll see exactly the same image. The only image that's slightly different is that this person's head is tilted in a different direction in one of the photos, but otherwise, it's only one photo. There's no other angles. There's another problem is in the photograph, unless they've changed this gown that she was supposedly wearing, there's no evidence of bloodstains, from this kitten that she supposedly was feasting on. So unless they've put her into hospital clothes, um, the report does say that they prepared her for going to a sedation room. So whether that includes changing her into hospital clothes, I don't know. But there's a lot of inconsistency with this. It is definitely quite creepy. Um, if there's any truth in this, I would say it's very plausible that you could have someone suffering mental health problems, schizophrenia, or other issues that would lead to delusions of, that she could be God. I think that is very plausible. The only bit that really gets me, well, there's two factors that really give me pause for thought. Number one is the fact that she supposedly had fangs. The photo certainly doesn't show that, and if these fangs really were long, she obviously couldn't close her mouth. So presumably, I mean that they're not in the photo. That just goes without saying. So that just doesn't add up. And secondly, is the fact that there is simply no other sources for this except those that have been circulating around since 2012. Now, whether the nurses who saw this were too traumatized to speak about it, but to me, the fact that two men were murdered on the spot and devoured by a woman with excessive strength. The thing about the strength, by the way, I don't think that's too extreme, because there have been patients with certain reactions. I forget the medical names, but I've heard of this where they can get exceptional strength in certain circumstances. So I don't think that's too far fetched. But yeah, it's a very strange story. Anyway, I'm just putting it out there. Apologies that my rendition of it wasn't ideal. I was trying to read small writing there, but just check it out for yourself. Let me know your thoughts. Do you think it's all nonsense? Do you think someone has just thought this would be a funny joke to put online and make it all up? Or do you think there's something to this? Let me know your thoughts.